Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is like a part 2 to the video I just did on your history starts before slavery. I didn't want to go over 10 minutes and have to kind of chop it up, so I just decided to do a second video. But I also want to add that even as Africans, some of us, I'm gonna go out on the limb and say the majority of us as well don't do a good job of understanding our own history. To be quite blunt with you, being Nigerian, we don't understand anything that happened prior to us being colonized by Britain. And even when they colonized us, they pretty much told us that what we were doing before was wrong. And even as Africans, I feel like we need to get back and understand what we were doing before we got colonized. I used to marvel at looking at the map, right? When I forgot when we learned, I forgot what they titled it in history. But when we were talking about colonization, I used to be amazed at how they showed Africa being carved up in terms of, you know, what European country controlled what region. And I was just like, wow, they really carved up Africa like it was a turkey. And, you know, for me as being African, we have to understand that, yo, what were we doing before that? We don't ask ourselves enough questions. Me being Nigerian, what are we, fourth or something in terms of oil producing countries? And, you know, why are we poverty stricken? You know, this is, I understand that the problem with Black history, we focus on it in terms of American culture, but we don't pay too much attention to what's going on in Africa and even the South Americas and the, you know, the Caribbean areas in terms of what we were doing before we were introduced to Europeans. What were we doing? And we need to get back to that and stop being ashamed. What happened was, with a lot of Africans, well, there was a whole bunch of shaming. What we were doing before was shamed, to the point now where I have some aunts and uncles who dislike even the whole idea of wearing your hair in dreadlocks and all that other stuff because they want to call it voodoo. I'm like, who told you it was voodoo? Who told you it was wrong to think like that? And I can't say that to them because that'd be disrespectful, but who told you what was proper? Who told you that? Was it another black person, or was it your colonizers who told you that? And like I said, you can't really tell this to their face because, you know, you don't want to get slapped, but you feel it on the inside and it kind of burns you on the inside because it's like, yo, what's really going on? So it's really an issue that I would have to say a lot of black skinned people have. We don't know what we were or what we were doing before we were colonized. Really, we don't. And it's a shame because after every generation, it's harder and harder to trace back in terms of what's going on. So I don't know, I had to put it out there because I don't want people to think that I'm just, you know, getting on African Americans. It's a problem that even Africans face. How much of our own history and culture do we know? What do we know about what was going on in South Africa before the whole apartheid system came into play? What were we doing before? So even that's, you know, my challenge to Africans. I've tried to do some research. I need to do a better job in terms of Nigeria before, but the book that I tried to read was pretty much started when Europeans or Britain came into play. That's when they wanted to start the history of Nigeria. So I need to go back because I want to know some real shit. I don't want to know about you know, what spears and art crafts did we make. That's all good, but I want to know in detail what we were doing. So it's going to take me a while, but that's one of, you know, my side challenges that I have. I need to know more about where I come from, because I'd be hypocritical if I spent so much time talking about what, you know, African Americans don't know, and I myself don't know, and most other Africans don't know in terms of their own respective country. So I don't want to talk about African culture. Of course, I want to know when you liberated yourself from whatever European colonizer you had, but I want to know what you were doing before. So that's my challenge to all my Ethiopians, my Ghanaians, my Kenyans, people from Uganda, South Africans, people from Congo, or wherever you find yourself from, Ivory Coast. Let me know, right? What was going on before you were colonized. Take it easy. God bless.